Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my Veterans to Success podcast. You probably know by now, my mission is to help 1 million veterans and entrepreneur business owners achieve the dreams, goals, and aspirations they deserve. That is why I created the Veterans to Success podcast, because I get to interview guys, men and women, who want to share their fascinating stories with you about their time before, during and after their time in the military, so you can benefit and overcome your challenges. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be mesmerized, astounded, and entertained.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Veterans to Success, the podcast where we speak to ordinary people who have extraordinary stories. And today I have no other than the great Michael Lawrence. Hello, Michael. Great to see you.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for the invitation.
My pleasure. And I know your story, and we did talk about it, and it's this same drill. There's no big introduction, because as we go along, the reveal happens, and then you who are listening can discover what an amazing life Michael has had. So let's just jump straight in, shall we? Tell me a little bit about your life, which is interesting, before the military.
Okay, so I'm mixed race. My father black, mother white. My father came across from Barbados in the 1950s as part of Windrush, and obviously met my mother, and they were married and had us 4 children. So I've got 2 older brothers and a younger sister, and we grew up I was born in West London, but we moved across London as I was a child, and we ended up in East London by the time I was in primary school. So quite a varied sort of mixture of different locations across London. And, you know, I was very much brought up, I suppose, with my father having, left us when I was 10 years old. I was very much brought up, I suppose, in a white environment, if you want to call it that. My mum was white, everyone around us was white. The area that we lived in was predominantly white. There were very few black people or people of colour in that particular area of London at that time. Quite a normal childhood at school, but school was challenging, to be honest. I was the only mixed race kid in my year, and people would have a grievance with that sometimes, and that would get me in a bit of hot water. And I won't pretend I was the model student. I wasn't. I was probably a bit of a disruptor in the classroom, so I got no sympathy from the teachers. I wasn't particularly clever, and so I suppose I suffered a bit from others, but I probably suffered a bit from myself as well.
Yeah, and I think that to say that was an understatement in a lot of what you said. having read your story and know your story, then that doesn't really describe it as tough as it was. And I know that you approach life as a matter of fact, if you like. So, the mixed race, and there were different ways that people regrettably referred to that, and that would have sort of left you neither feeling white or feeling black, if that's fair to say. So how did that leave you feeling as a young lad at school, and not particularly academic either, and maybe not the teacher's pet?
Yeah, so you make a really good point. So I had some challenges, you might say, with my identity right up into my 30s, if I'm honest. But back in those young days, I just couldn't understand, if I'm honest, why I wasn't white. Everyone around me was white. And the things that you hear are absolutely true, because I've been there. I've been in the bath, tried to scrub my skin, thinking that I'll become white if I do. Going to bed at night thinking that, as I get older, I'll get whiter.
Yeah.
thinking that they were the things, you know, as a child, you think these things. Couldn't understand why people acted different towards me because of the color of my skin, but it was quite obvious and evident that people would treat me in a different way. And I suppose, you know, sort of discovering how being treated different was an everyday sort of occurrence. I remember my eldest brother, you know, on his way to school being shot in the back with an air rifle, and having to then go to hospital to have the slug taken out of his back, you know, and that was put down to you know, aggravated sort of racial event, and sort of that discovery of being different and people treating you different and not understanding why very much made me want to be white and not understanding why I wasn't.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I think that wasn't just the end of it, was it? Because there was no real safe haven for you at times, was there? Because you go home and you mentioned that your dad wasn't the most affectionate of people either.
Yeah, no. So in the younger days, no, he absolutely wasn't. He, you know, you know, I can't remember ever sitting on his lap. I can't remember ever holding his hand. I can't remember him ever hugging me or telling me that he loved me. That doesn't mean that he didn't. It's just I have no recollection of that. You know, my only recollection of him is always when he was, you know, quite stern just before a beating or whatever it was. You know, he was, you know, it was an old-fashioned kind of dad that meted out his sort of dislike for something in it physically, you know, and that's the way it was in those days, and you accept it because you thought it was a norm. You thought, you know, this is the life of every kid. You know, it didn't feel like I was being particularly picked on or that it was different. Yeah, it's just the way that it was.
Yeah, and we were born in the same year actually, so I know exactly. Yeah, I know exactly the generation that you're talking about, and my dad shares a lot of the traits, and it was tough in those days. You know, when my dad was working on a big site, he before health and safety were words that related with each other, and he didn't mention them in the same phrase. He actually saw people killed on the site, building site, and it was a tough time then. So yeah, and like I was chatting to you about when I had my first incident with near death, when I broke both my legs and I had some other injuries, and the bully said to me, right, O'Connor, I'm going to get you and I'm going to really hurt you. And the next time I went to see the specialist, I said, you know my legs, how strong are they? And he said, oh, they're very strong. They're stronger than they were before. So then the next time we had a different conversation, because then you're coming from a place of strength. And the reason I'm mentioning that is not to talk about me per se, but to put your frame of mind in where now we're going to, because it's true to say that even though you may not have realized it at the time, you're starting to get stronger and stronger, aren't you, as days go by?
Yeah, no, I absolutely. You know, I could look at some of the bad things. It's like, you know, I look at, you know, I left school and I could easily blame racism for me leaving school with no qualifications. Because I remember, you know, at 15 leaving and never coming back after, you know, I was, you know, the latest sort of incident of me being ganged up on, you know, racially. And my hand was held down and a bike chain was used to whip across my hand and basically sort of splayed my hand open. And that was a straw that broke the camel's back. You know, I went home and said to my mum, you know, that's it, I'm never going back again, and neither did I. Now I could blame that on the reason that, you know, I didn't have any qualifications, but the truth is that's not the reason. The truth is that, you know, I was too solid, I was too thick. You know, I wouldn't have got through any qualifications or any exam that you had put in front of me. So I don't want to use that as an excuse, because that, you know, that wouldn't be right. But you're absolutely right. It started to temper me right from the beginning. It started to make me think about how I needed to kind of look after myself and how I needed to act around other people and how I didn't want people to act around me, you know, just as importantly.
And I mean, we missed out a little bit or brushed over a little bit of your life, because at the age of 10, you your father left, your mum and dad split up.
Yeah, so yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So he left us when I was 10. Like I say, 2 older brothers and a younger sister. We ended up becoming homeless that very day, and we spent the night in a police station waiting room. All 5 of us. The next day, someone come along from the council, and they put us into a hostel in Ilford, which was then Essex, now Greater London. And we had a room that was big enough for 2 single beds in it, and the 5 of us would share that room. And there were other families in that house as well, similar sort of size, similar rooms. And we would, as families, we would all share the cooking facilities and ablutions, your toilets, etc., between us. So that was quite a, between the mums trying to sort of deconflict, that was quite a task, as you can imagine. But my mum slept on one bed with my sister. My eldest brother slept on the other bed because he was the eldest. And me and my middle brother, we slept on the floor. We was there for just over 6 months or so, like that. And then we come up that we've been given a council house, which to us was like a castle, it was a mansion. It was like huge. The fact that I was sharing my bedroom with one other brother. My sister had her own room.
That'd be massive, that, wouldn't it?
It felt like a castle. It's like, well, this is all for us. Where are the other families? What, I can go to the toilet when I want. It was unbelievable. It was fantastic, and we felt, we felt like we really gained something. It was a real advantage. It was a really good time. I remember my childhood fondly. As all the bad things that went on. That was fantastic.
And then thank you for that. And then, even though you'd had that respite in the fact that the difference from sleeping in one room, then moving to a house and having a massive mansion in comparison, then life got a little bit depressing, in your own words, when your brothers joined the army, and then you're left being the only male at home, and then you started to get into the wrong sort of company.
Yeah. So as you say, both my older brothers would end up joining the army. The eldest brother was always a soldier of the family. He was always going to be a soldier, loved it, sort of read all the magazines, had aeroplanes and stuff hanging from his ceiling and all the rest of it. He was always going to be the soldier. I was never going to be the soldier. I was short for my age. I was overweight. I had big Deirdre Barlow glasses. I was the furthest thing you could think from being a soldier. And if I'm absolutely honest, I was pretty soft in those days, and I was, in terms of, physical activity, was not my thing. I couldn't cycle up the road before I was already out of breath. So I wasn't, a physical specimen as such, and people wouldn't look at me as a sort of person that would do anything physical. But the reality is that the area that I was in, East London now at this stage, there was a lot of criminality about, and I could feel myself getting drawn into that, low level stuff, but increasing as we went along, and that really concerned me. So there was a number of things, I suppose, that made me turn towards wishing to join the army, even though I was not the army type. And one of those was my eldest brother was serving out in Northern Ireland and got shot, not fatally, and he made a full recovery. But at the time, I received a phone call from the Ministry of Defence with someone asking for my mother, who was at work, and I said, look, she's at work. There's no one here. It's just me. And they said, right, well, pass on the message that your eldest brother's been shot. He's in hospital. We're expecting him to recover, but we don't know yet. And that was it. None of the.
And how old were you at this time?
I was 15 at that time. Right. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a bit of a shock. So probably the person from the Ministry of Defence had obviously been on an advanced course for how to make friends and influence people, or he'd had a charisma bypass or something.
I mean, that's how it was done in those days. It was a different era. It was a different era, but the thing is, tell him when my mum come home, telling my mum that.
Yeah, we'll actually go into that, because I know what happened, and you must have been, apart from being devastated, your mum's coming home, right? you hear her coming to the door. What do you do then?
Yeah, I actually, pushed against the door so she could. So she got the key in the door and trying to open the door, and she can't because I've got my weight behind it, and I'm shouting through the door, "Mum, I need to tell you something." And she's saying, "Yeah, what's going on? Why can't I?" I'm saying, "Mum, I need to tell you something." And then I sort of blurted it out. Tyron's been shot. And I could hear her crying behind the door. At which time I then let go of the door, and she came in, and we're both sort of almost on our knees crying. And it was, why did I sort of hold the door closed? I don't know. I haven't got an answer for that. It just felt for me that it was the right thing to do to let her know what had happened before she came through the door. But to say that I felt absolutely and utterly useless at that time is an understatement. She's crying her eyes out. One of her boys has been shot. Out on tour, and there she's got this 15-year-old who's acting probably quite inappropriately by keeping her behind the door and crying his eyes out as well, and not knowing what to do, and not even offering to make her a cup of tea. I mean, it was just a devastating time, a memory that will always stay with me, because I felt so utterly useless. I felt I could do nothing for my mother, who really, really needed me at that time.
Yeah, and I totally get that, and I understand that must have been a really tough time for you. That was the first shockwave, because you had two shockwaves that sort of give you the kick up the backside to say, listen, mate, you gotta change your life. You gotta do something. So
Yeah.
After this devastating news, and bearing in mind you've still got the criminality element, albeit just petty crime. What was the big next shockwave that made you think, blinking heck, if I don't change, I'm going to end up dead or injured or something?
Yeah, so the next one was when I was sort of 16, early 17, and I was approached by two people I knew in a pub that I used to frequent, and one was Australian, one was English, and they took me to one side and said, "Look, we've got a job for you, and we'll pay you well if you do this job." And I knew it was criminal related, but I didn't know what it was. And then they spelled it out to me, and the long and short of it is it was really to kill someone. They wanted me to kill someone, and I said, "Look, let me have a think about it, and I'll get back to you at the beginning of next week," type of thing. And I went away for the weekend and had a really good think about it. And I come back and I said, "Look, thanks for thinking of me," and all that. But I'm not your man. But thanks very much. And about 6 months later, one of the guys ended up going down for attempted murder. So obviously they couldn't get anyone to do it, did it themselves, and it failed. But the point being for me was not the fact that I had said no. It's the fact that I had to wrestle with myself to say no. So that whole weekend, 1 minute, yeah, I'm going to do it. Then, no, I'm not going to do it. Then, yeah, I'm going to do it. And by the time I ended up telling him, it was, no, I'm not going to do it. But it could have just have been as easy as yes, I am going to do it. And that really, really got to me. Where the hell was I that I was in that mindset that I could even contemplate that?
I was going to ask, actually, what struggles did you have? Because, I mean, stuff must have been going on for you not to be able to say no straight away. So the fact that you considered it indicates that, you were having some real challenges at that time, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, firstly, the money that was being offered, I can't remember what it was. It's in the hundreds of pounds. But at the time, that was we're talking in the 70s now. I mean, that was a king's ransom what was being offered to me. So that was a major attraction, of course. And the other thing is, I just didn't really see any prospects going forward in terms of employment for myself. So I wasn't sure. I didn't have any direction. This, that, and the other. I was working as a postboy in what's now known as BT. It used to be known as something else before, but BT. I was working as a postboy, and when I would turn 18, the natural progression is that you become a postman. And I just couldn't imagine walking around the street. Not that there's anything wrong with being a postman, but I couldn't imagine just walking around the streets at 5 o'clock in the morning posting letters. So I didn't see any prospects I didn't see any way of making decent money, and all of a sudden this offer came to me. But even with that, it should have just been a flat no, but it wasn't. It really wasn't, and that's a real concern.
And I suppose, you know, that sort of struggle still goes on now, doesn't it? It must do with various people. I've had some decisions to make in my life, just the same as you, and I think that what decision you make at that time, it can go one way or the other, and you know, so I'm glad you made the decision you did, because
it really was a major turning point in my life, because it could have just as easily gone the other way. And that combination of those things that happened said to me, you know, you have to get away from here. You have to go and do something. You know, stupidly in my head, you know, I still had sort of, I need to go to Northern Ireland. I need to shoot some Irish people for shooting my brother. You know, as you do as a young young person. Coupled with, I have to get away from here. And of course, I had two brothers already in the army, so I know that, you know, I knew of that route into the army and to get away. So, you know, my initial joining up was for 3 years, which was the minimum you could sign up for in those days. And I thought, in that 3 years, it will get me away from here, wherever. I'll be posted anywhere. I don't care where it is. It will get me away from here and give me 3 years to kind of sort myself out, so I never have to return. And that was the original plan.
Yeah, and you joined us in the Royal Artillery as a gunner, didn't you?
That's right.
And as a recruit on phase 1 and phase 2, as it's known now. Back in those days, maybe something different. I know it was.
Yeah, it was a depot regiment back then.
Yeah. And the wonderful directive staff who would launch bed packs out of the window, and your bed as well, if they could get it through there, would adorn the floor with all the kit that you've folded up 12 by 12 and hung up and pressed and spent all night. Now that was standard, wasn't it? That was standard. But for you, it got a little bit different though, didn't it? Because like, you're not seen as normal, are you? No.
No. So remembering now, so we're back in 1979 now, when I went into basic training. And you're absolutely right. All those things were the norm. You expected your board boots to get scratched. You expected your bed block to go out the window. Of course, it was all part and parcel. But, you know, again, I was the only person of color in my particular troop, and you know, a lot of people didn't like that. You know, it's one of those things. When I speak to people now, it's hard for them to believe, but back in those days, you could meet people, particularly from the north and particularly from Scotland or wherever, but it's true, that had never met a person of color before in their life. They might have seen them on TV, in the movies or whatever, but they never actually met a person of color in their life. They never talked to a person of color. And so for a lot of people, I was the first person of color they'd ever met and ever spoken to. And of course, there were preconceived, you know, biases and ideas. People, you know, sort of fear what they don't know and don't understand. You know, there was ignorance around it. So there was lots of bigoted opinions. In those days, it was okay to say that you were part of the National Front, or you believed in the National Front, or whatever. You know, that wasn't a bad thing back then. That was your opinion, and it was okay, and people could voice that openly. You know, use of the N word and other words like that was commonplace. You know, you didn't have to hide it. You didn't have to say it under your breath. You know, you could say it loud and proud right in the middle of the street or across the parade square if you wanted to. And that happened regularly. Yeah, that happened regularly.
And I feel your pain to some extent, because even though you wouldn't recognise by my accent, I was born in Glasgow, and I used to go up to Glasgow regularly. And as I got older, as a young boy, but as I got older, I went up when I passed out, after passing out, in my number 2s, and I was wanted to show off, really, because, you know, I was proud. And I said, "Are you coming out for a drink?" He said, "You can't go out for a drink in Glasgow with an accent like yours, because they'll know you're not Scottish." And I thought, but I am. So that is just a snapshot of what you went through on a daily basis. Now, so you're at Depot Reg, right? And you got the normal banter and the normal disciplinary stuff, but it got a little bit more serious for you. What can you share with us about that? Because and the reason I'm going through this is I want to share. I'm really keen to show people generally that no matter what happens, it's what you do with it and how it can make you stronger. So
Yeah.
And I know what happened, and I think that it's disgraceful myself. But just share with us some of the challenges that you had.
Yeah, so there were two troop bombardiers who really disliked me, didn't want me in their troop, thought it was a bit of a travesty to have a person of colour in their troop. And at the time, like I said, I'd signed up for 3 years, but as a 17-year-old, because I wasn't 18 yet, there was a form actually that you could sign, and if you signed it, you was gone within a day, within 24 hours. That's it. You was back at home. And there's lots of people that were over 18 that wish that still applied to them. But anyway, it applied to me as a 17-year-old. So yeah, I was called into the one of the Bombardier's offices, to the DS office, and I was presented with this form that I had to sign, and he told me to sign it, and I'd be away that day. And I said, no, Bombardier, I don't want to sign this. Thank you very much. And off I went back to the room. As time went on, unfortunately, that they sort of upped the ante on that. So they would come in, tell the room to get out. Everyone got out, less for me. I'm still standing there to attention at the end of my bed. And then they'd set upon me, physically, physically beat me up, telling me, to come to the office and sign that paper. And at the time I'm being beaten up and my arm bent up my back and I'm crying my eyes out, and I'm saying, yes, Bombardier, I'll come and sign the paper. I'll come, to make them stop. And then, the God, less than 12 steps it took me to get to their office. Already I was being defiant. And by the time I got there, standing there crying my eyes out, I'm like, no, Bombardier, I will not sign, Bombardier,
And now this is probably, if we link back to that weekend that you took to decide you didn't want to kill someone, now that has made you stronger because you've got a thought process, right, that you can go through to get to a decision quicker, can't you? So by the time you got the short journey to the DS office, directive staff office, you said effectively do one, didn't you?
Yeah, basically.
And you're a 17-year-old lad who's been bullied by two bombardiers who, yeah, whatever. And yet you went in there as a young lad and said no. How did that make you feel?
Yeah, so it's difficult because it's that defiance that rises within you. So in some ways in my head, I'm thinking, God, what are you saying? Because you're letting yourself open for another beating here. And indeed I was. But as it went on, it happened again and again and again. And it was the same, it was a repeat all the time, that marching down to the office, that coming to attention, tears still streaming down my cheeks, still in pain, from what had just happened. But I would say no, and one of the great satisfactions, I suppose, that I had is the guys in my dorm. I used to get racially abused by them all the time. And like I said, some of them I'm the first person of color they'd ever met. And we had our disagreements and this, that, and the other. But, I could stand up to myself for a degree. But they weren't used to seeing this, where they were all sent out and then me being beaten up and knowing that I couldn't defend myself, that even if I wanted to fight back, that I wouldn't, because they're bombardiers and I'm not. And then being marched to the office and being told to sign this, and then being defiant and coming back crying my eyes out. And it started to get to where I was getting solidarity from those guys, which I never expected. And what would happen is the bombardiers would come in and say, right, everyone out. And everyone knew what was happening. And it was almost like a slow clap, because although they would eventually leave, they would almost take too long to leave, and they would deliberately kind of show a bit of defiance in terms of not being impressed with these bombardiers, and they would have to shout, come on, quicker, get out. And they would still walk quite slow to get out the room. So they were showing solidarity with me in the little way that they could. But also in terms of our relationship after that, me being bullied or abused by those people in my very dorm, that would come to an end. They they would support me in ways that I wasn't expecting.
Oh, that's really heartening to know. And when you come together strong. So you finish basic training, and thank you for sharing that. So around about 1979, you go to the depot reg, and then things aren't made that much easier, are they, really, on your first posting? What happens then? Because, yeah, I read about some interesting stuff. There were two dynamics with another guy who was of different ethnicity. So tell me about that. How did that dynamic work?
So in terms of so during basic training, like I said, I was the only mixed race kid in my troop. In one of the other troops was a black guy called Dennis, and he was just a really good looking guy, a really muscular guy, a really just everything about him just stood out, and the guys loved him. Everyone loved him, but also he was like hard as nails, so no one messed with him. Just no one messed. He was the fastest, the strongest, the this, the that, everything. And so he didn't really have any problems. I know we knew of each other. We had nothing to do with each other. So, he wasn't in a position to defend me, and, we wasn't even in the same troop. So, there was no way that he could have. But it was just such a difference in terms of how I was treated to how he was treated was just unbelievable. And it's funny because even though we left basic training and we still didn't really know each other that well, later on, years later, we would become very good friends. And actually, as we sit here now in 2024, we are still very good friends.
Wow.
So there you go. Yeah.
That's great to know. And I had a similar situation where in my troop, I was a PTI as well, and I was a troop PTI as well as the regiments. And we had a guy from India, lovely fella. His name was Ben, and he got picked on a little bit. So I took him under my wing, and he was such a good soldier. It's just that he felt lost. And I think that if you can create a relationship with each other, that goes far beyond anything, because that gives you a real bond then, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It certainly does. Yeah. But yeah, like I say, I've got some really, really good friends, even to this very day. Black and white. Don't misunderstand me.
Of course.
From all walks of life. Those friendships that were made in the army was fantastic.
And Crusader 1980 in Germany. Oh, I remember that because I used to get the war stories, because I didn't get out to Germany until 81. I was there for Lionheart, I think it was.
Yes, Lionheart.
And they'd always say, "Oh, blinking at Lionheart's nothing to compare to Crusader." I'd be like this, "Oh yes, fill up a sandbag, swing the light, mate." Yeah. So you were part of a 3-man crew on that, weren't you?
Yeah. So I suppose just prior to that, so just understanding. So in 1980, I went to my first unit in Germany.
Yeah.
4-5 Field Regiment, Royal Artillery, and up until this point, as I said, I had always considered myself, I suppose, to be white, and not understanding why I wasn't white. But still going through all these problems.
Do you like coffee? A lot of people tend to spend money on expensive coffees from outlets without even thinking about it. Well, for the price of just 2 coffees per month, you can gain access to valuable business and life resources gained from my over 37 years in business and 15 years in the military. These world-class resources are designed to help you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations you deserve. So visit joeteams.com now to find out more. That's JOETEAMS.com to find out more.
Then facing this overt racism, having joined my first unit, racism, people shouting the N-word across parade squares and that. I mean, I was sort of taken in by the black community there, the guys of color that were there within the unit. And up until that point, I was really skeptical at first, when they sort of invited me into the room and they wanted to take me out that night. I thought I was going to get rolled. I thought I was going to get robbed and everything, because my experience up till now had always been in a white environment, and black people I had nothing to do with. And there was a stereotype around black people that I suppose I had taken on as well, in terms of, why I don't want anything to do with them. That, they're going to beat me up and rob me and this, that, and the other. So then to be taken in by the black community was just eye-opening. It was just wonderful. It's just, just fantastic, fantastic friends, such support, really looked after me, gave me good guidance and mentored me, some fantastic people. And then that was the second part, I suppose, crisis in identity, because then I couldn't understand why I wasn't black. I really, really wanted to be black. I really wanted to be one of these guys. I felt inadequate, one, because I was mixed race. Two, because a lot of these guys had joined the army from a Caribbean country. A lot of them come from Jamaica or from Trinidad or whatever. And there's me, having been born in London type thing. So I felt quite inadequate, but they were completely and utterly accepting of me, which is, I suppose, the first time I had ever felt that sort of complete acceptance. So I was now in a different environment where, if anything, maybe I was racist towards white people. I didn't particularly like them. There was nothing any good happened when we got together, if you know what I mean. So moving forward to this exercise. So I'm just 18 years old. My first exercise crusade, a huge exercise in Germany. And we just finished an NBC serial, what today people called CBRN, a chemical serial. So I was wearing my chemical suit, which is lined with charcoal, and that's an important point in this particular story. So we had some downtime after this serial. It was quite chilly, so we had all still sat there with our chemical suits on, because they're actually quite warm. They provide a good warm layer. And there was one guy who was an overt racist. No ifs, no buts. There was no airs and graces about it. He'd quite happy to tell you that he was a racist, quite happy to tell you that, you shouldn't be here and this, that, and the other. And he come over with a 20-litre jerry can, a fuel can. And I was sitting on the floor talking to another guy and didn't really think much of it. And all of a sudden, he's pouring this petrol onto my legs.
Right. Okay.
And it just took me by a bit of shock, I suppose. I'm sitting there, sort of shocked. And before I knew it, he's got this box of matches out and he's lit it and he's set me alight. So I'm sitting on the floor, flames licking up, in total panic. And luckily, the other guy that I've been chatting to, he started scraping up earth off the ground and trying to put it over my legs. I'm doing the same. I'm sensible enough to know not to stand up. Do not stand up, because the flames will rise. I can feel my legs burning, and we're trying to get it out. Meanwhile, this guy that done it is just got this manic laugh about him, like the bloody Joker from Batman. A real manic laugh, like just crazy. And he's run off somewhere giggling to himself. And we managed to get to get the flames out. And it was the NBC suit that saved my legs, that saved me from serious burns. And what had happened is there were no hairs left on my legs, and they were red raw, and it was basically having really bad, like, sunburn, when you just can't touch them, this, that, and the other. It was like basically having really bad sunburn on my legs, which obviously would last for ages. And I went to the sergeant, to say, Jesus Christ, son, what's happening? And he put it down to, hijinks. He put it down to, just someone having a bit of a laugh, and what was the problem? I'm not burnt, am I? Type thing. And the following day, because we were still in the same location, the following day I was sat with a different guy chatting, and this same nutter come out of the woods, and he had fashioned a cross out of branches, doused it all in petrol and set it alight. So he came running with this flaming cross out of the woods at me. And I got up and I started to run. The guy next to me thought this was all some big joke or whatever, and come after me. Unfortunately, he was our battery 100-meter champion. So he caught me and took me down to the ground in sort of a rugby tackle, laughing. And I looked at him and I said, what are you doing? He said, oh, we're just having a, I said, no, look at this guy's face. Look. And he turned around and he looked at the guy's face running at me with this flaming cross. And you could see the penny drop, and he looked at me and he let go and he said, Michael, run, just run. And I got up and I ran. And I would run into the woods and I would come back hours later. And again, I approached the sergeant and said, this is just not acceptable. This is ridiculous. I'm living in fear here. I'm living, and the sergeant would then go and sort of bollock this guy and have a go at him and tell him to stop doing it and this. But that was it. That was the end of it. That was no more done about it. Unbelievable. Yeah.
Ironically enough, though, it didn't finish there because you felt a little bit strongly about it, which I think if I was in your position, I would as well. When you made a few more protestations, you got a rollicking as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I got making a fuss about nothing. Can't you take a laugh? All the rest of it. I end up getting a bigger bollocking than the guy that did it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is, well, just totally gobsmacked. I'm speechless. But the thing is, right, we're talking about growing stronger day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, and dealing with the stuff, right? You met this bloke again, didn't you?
Yeah, so I mean, we were in the same unit, so it's a day-to-day thing that I would see him. But I would, so for the next 2 years, I would absolutely try and stay away from him. I feared this guy. I was worried about being around him at any time. If I was walking towards him on the same side of the street, I'd cross the street. If we were in the same room, I'd leave the room. I'd do anything to get away from him. I feared him. I was scared of him. There's no doubt about it. That's how I felt. And this is a couple of years later now, so 1982, and we're in the Falkland Islands. So I wasn't there for the actual conflict. We arrived as the first people after conflict, you might say. But we were down in Stanley, at Port Stanley, where we had stuff going on. And that's just someone arriving in the back door. So the dogs want to go out. Out you go. Thank you. So apologies for that. So yeah, so we're in Port Stanley, and one of my best friends, one of the guys that befriended me when I first got there, was a bombardier, a black guy. And the nutter guy, at this point was a lance bombardier. And they were in the comms room, and the bombardier come in, and he started saying, this for this shift, this is what he wants, and this, that, and the other, this is what everyone's to do, doing the sort of the normal type stuff. And this guy's yes, bombardier, no bombardier, 3 bags full, bombardier, no problem, bombardier. Yeah. And I'm sitting at the back of the room, and no one had kind of noticed me at the back of the room. Right. I'm just sitting there doing whatever. And the bombardier left the room. And when he left the room, this lance bombardier, the nutter, then turned around to the others and said, bloody black bastard, N-word this and N-word that, and how dare he tell us what to do, and who does he think he is, and giving it all this, and it was at that point, remembering that up until this point, I was absolutely scared of this guy. I didn't want anything to do with him. But something just twigged right there. So because I saw the cowardness of him turning around to him and saying, yes, bombardier, no bombardier. And as soon as he was out of the room, absolutely, slagging him off so badly. And something clicked, and all the fear completely went. And I turned around to this guy, who then realized I was there. And I said, look, I've had enough of this. You and me outside, let's go. Let's sort this out. I've just had enough of you. I'm not running from you anymore. Let's go and sort this out. And of course, like all cowards, he completely backed down. And all of a sudden, Mick, my mate, Mick, you're my mate type thing. No, I'm not your mate. And I never will be. And then after that, it was just a relationship of toleration. So he stayed away from me, I stayed away from him, but I was never scared of him again from that day. And in fact, I don't think I was ever scared of anyone again from that day. And I was able to then change my life, I suppose, because it was at that point, I was coming, I'd served over 2 years. I was never chasing promotion. I was never trying to impress anyone, because as far as I was concerned, I was going to do my 3 years and out. And it was
Yeah.
at that point that I realized that actually I really enjoyed being in the army, and I really enjoyed being around the majority of these people, and that I wanted to stay longer, and that if I wanted to stay longer, then I had to get rank, had to get promotion, because the only way I could affect my environment, i.e. make sure that people were treated right, make sure that people weren't treated the same way that I was, have some kind of authority in being able to say what needed saying,
Yeah.
to be able to hold people to account. I had to get rank. So
Yeah.
so that was a turning point for me, where I basically buckled down and started trying to get promotion.
And I remember the time distinctly, because in that particular time in history, I was listening to Marvin Gaye. I remember his album. I used to love that. And I worked in the gym with one Afro-Caribbean, and the other was South African, right? And wow, could they run? They were the run engineer sprinters. It was Nick Myers and Wishy Hines, and we all worked in the gym together. And they were a great laugh, but I could see the oppression that they were facing, even though they were top of the game and they were Lance Jacks, one strike. So I totally get it. And there's a part in what I read about you, like you recognized you're no longer a white boy now, are you? Because you went through a period where you wanted to scrub yourself, didn't you? To be white. So when that realization happened, what was that like?
Yeah, so like I say, all of a sudden now I wanted to be black. It was a complete change. It was a complete 180, and I couldn't understand. Not that I couldn't understand. I could understand, but I wished that both my parents had been black, that I'd been born black, that I'd been born in the Caribbean, and all the rest of it. Because the people around me that really cared for me, that looked after me, were all people from that background. We used to talk patois, so we all used to.
We'll take it.
This meeting is being recorded.
So, yes. So we were talking there about how you recognized that you were no longer the white boy and you wanted to be black now, and you were quite happy with that, weren't you?
I was very happy with that. Yeah, I was very happy with that. And right through the 80s and into the early 90s, I was very happy with that. It was great that there was like a disco nightclub for all you youngsters. There was a disco night scene in Germany. So there were different clubs on different nights where, as a black person, that's where you'd be. It was like a circuit, and you'd be there. There were clubs that white soldiers weren't allowed to enter. There was off limits to them. So you could go to a club where you had no white soldiers around you, where they played serious music, where you could dance all night, and where lots of women would come to as a result. So in terms of the club life was just fantastic in Germany at that time. Was just magic. And in the same way that I'd met lots of guys when I joined the army that had never met a person of color. It was the same with lots of Germans. So I had lots of German friends that I made friends because they come up to me and wanted to touch my skin or touch my hair. Girlfriends were as a result of a lot of times curiosity. So it was a really good time back then. We really had fun. We weren't about fighting or this, that, and the other, or getting drunk. In fact, very few of us drunk alcohol at all, and we were always driving. But it was all about dancing. It was all about going out and dancing all night.
Well, I remember because I was in Osnabrück in the 1981 to 83 November, and that was a garrison town, and there were always fights there. So I used to go to Bramsch, which was outside of the city, to a place called the Music Laden, and all Germans in there, very few British soldiers. We used to have a great time when I learned German, because you learned German to speak German quite fluently, didn't you?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to progress to linguist. Yeah, by the time I become a colloquial speaker in 1984. So that was 4 years in, and by the time I was 6 or 7 years in, I'd become a linguist. Yeah.
Yeah, and you started to form some real good, strong relationships, didn't you, in the military and outside of the military?
Yeah, fantastic. So in the military, as I say, you know, friends that I still have friends today, you know, absolutely brilliant. I had lots of German friends back in those days, because it was, there were times when I would get out of uniform on a Friday evening and go out, and I'd be out all weekend and not come back until sort of late on a Sunday or early on a Monday morning. And I've gone a whole weekend where I've maybe been just with German friends, and I've not spoken a word of English. I'd speak German the whole time. So I had a really good network of German friends as well as my Black British friends.
And you started to progress up the ranks now, because not despite of, probably we could say because of the challenges that you had, because as you go up the ranks, there was still some hostility to you as someone who isn't white, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I suppose so. Firstly, there was a perception. It was an incorrect perception, but it was a perception at the time amongst us that the highest you could go as a person of color was bombardier, a corporal, 2 tapes.
Right.
You couldn't go higher than that. You couldn't become a senior NCO as a person of color. You couldn't do it. Of course, that wasn't true, but it was a perception that we had at the time.
Yeah.
So when one of my friends, one of my good friends, was promoted to sergeant, it was an epiphany. It was like, whoa! It was like, you'd heard about, it was like an urban myth that you heard about Black people being senior NCOs. But now all of a sudden I knew someone, this is my friend. He's been promoted to sergeant. Unbelievable. It really sort of opened my eyes and sort of, so Bombardier is not just the only place I can go to. I can go further than that. That's fantastic. And then another one of my friends was promoted. So there were 2 Black guys in the sergeant's mess in that regiment. Fantastic, brilliant. Anyway, it come to time for me to be promoted to sergeant, and we had a new RSM in, and that RSM just put a stop to it. And I paraphrase his words of, I've already got 2 ends in the mess that I've inherited. I'm not going to have a third. And my promotion was stopped, and I had to wait 2 years until that person was posted out. And within a week of him being posted out, I was promoted to sergeant. So as far as I'm concerned, it put me back 2 years of my promotion, which was really, really annoying. And the only reason that I understand it to be was the fact that he just didn't want a third person of color in his mess, and it was as simple as that. And it was in those days where the RSM had the say on who went in his mess or not. Different from today. It's completely different days, a different era, different ethos. Not something that you can compare to today, or you'd ever be able to justify today.
Yeah, because the RSM could walk on water, really.
Basically, yeah.
Same in my time. Despite that, you went on various tours, going from the Falklands to Northern Ireland, which would have been interesting back in those days.
Yeah.
And Iraq and Afghanistan. So you've got a few tours under your belt now, and you're striving up the ranks. And where do you get to that you, on the non-commissioned ranks, that you didn't think was ever possible for a person of colour?
Yeah, so I would end up being, you know, a W01 regimental sergeant major. You know, who would have ever thought that possible? No one ever thought that possible. My friends were just so jubilant. I mean, it was just unbelievable because of all of us. The highest, one guy, the highest he had got to was Warrant Officer Class 2.
I was
So
just
by
about
me,
to say, yeah,
yeah.
you were the first, weren't you?
So me breaching that threshold, going to Warrant Officer Class 1, you know, I was like the, you know, the poster child of the group. It was like, whoa, you know, unbelievable. You know, you've got there. And by that time, lots of my friends were out, but we were still in
Yeah.
contact, and they were so chuffed for me. It was just brilliant. It was fantastic.
And now being the person walking on water and reflecting on the way the regiment's disciplined, because that's one of your roles, in fact, a primary role, really, and to mentor the CO. What sort of changes did you think needed to be happened, and how did you implement things?
Yeah, so again, you know, it's, you know, my way of trying to influence things was always through getting to know people and getting people to know me, and just to realize I'm just a normal person. There's nothing abnormal about me, and there's nothing abnormal about you. We're just all the same. So that's how I continued along. There were challenges. There've always been challenges at every rank, in every role. There's always been challenges with people, and there were challenges there. So I was the RSM in a regiment in Scotland, and there were some preconceived ideas by people and some bigoted people even then. And you know, and in the locker room where I had my locker, you know, I would have, you know, the N-word scraped out on the door of my locker and stuff like that. I would never have anything said to my face. You know, there would never be any overt racism towards me. Of course,
so that's another version of jock then.
Yeah.
the bully who can't face up to anything.
Unfortunately, yeah. I think, but the difference in me now is, I suppose, my third transition. So firstly, you know, I class myself as a sort of a white boy, and then I class myself as a black soldier. And now I suppose at this stage now I'm classing myself as a brown man. So now I've completely come to terms with who I am. I'm mixed race. I love being both races. I love being the best of both. And I'd completely come to be comfortable in my own body, in the color of my own skin at this point. I didn't crave to be white. I didn't crave to be black. I really, really actually enjoyed, and I still continue to this day to enjoy it, to be brown. So I was at a different stage in terms of my identity. But as you say, trying to lead by example, and the way that I treated people was how I tried to get across how people should be treated.
And what we've got in common, actually, which I'm really proud of, is we're human beings.
Yes, yeah.
Right. And I think often this idea of segregation doesn't really need to take place. I'm quite strong about this. I feel strongly, because at the end of the day, if someone can do just as well as you, well then, yeah, that's it. They can do the job. That's it. I have no preconceptions. I just like to surround myself with good people. And,
yeah, exactly.
And that's the main thing. Now, I maybe gave the wrong impression, because you didn't just do those tours of the places I said. You went to over 30 countries. And now you've got the next step then from RSM. There's only one way to go. Well, there's two ways, actually. Get out. I've done my time. Yeah, see you. You chose not to do that because we've got it that you're a bit stubborn, defiant, or you don't like to be told no. So, commissioned officer.
Yeah.
You've already profoundly dismembered anyone's opinion that someone of colour can get to above sergeant or even to sergeant. Now you're RSM. So what happens then with your commission?
Yeah, so you know, I was very, very proud to commission. You know, it was not something I ever expected. I didn't ever believe that I could see myself as being an officer. And again, my you know, my friendship group, you know, just absolutely chuffed, unbelievable. Who had ever done that? No one that they knew, you know, of color. Fantastic. You know, I embraced being an officer. I like to think I've never changed the way that I am. I'm still Michael Lawrence at the end of the day, and the Michael Lawrence that everyone would recognise. But in terms of my ethos, in terms of how I treated people and wanted to be treated, that didn't change. And in fact, what would happen is because I was an officer, I would become a bit of a beacon to people of colour.
Yeah.
So although you would have people within the regiment who had titles that for diversity and all that, and who you go and see if this, that, and the other, what would normally end up is that people would come and see me by default. They would come and see me, and as opposed to the proper channels, and I would end up getting involved in trying to sort of, I suppose, mitigate and arbitrate in terms of cases of racial discrimination, or indeed, sometimes in making clear that it wasn't racial discrimination. I had a number of those cases where I had people come to me and say, they're being racist towards me, this, that, and the other. And when I dug into it, I found out that no, they'd been late on more than one occasion. Someone had raised their voice at them, and then all of a sudden they were crying racism. And I said, no, you were late. You were in the wrong. That person that then disciplined you was absolutely right and proper to discipline you. There's nothing racial about that. That's you being slack. So it certainly wasn't just ever one way. It was always very fair, very measured.
Yeah, and I know your mantra is no idea is above scrutiny, but no individual is below dignity. And you think someone famous said it, but it doesn't matter, does it? Because what strength do you derive and extract from that phrase, mantra?
Yeah, I suppose just the fact that despite whether you agree with someone or not, doesn't give you the right to then just rip into them or to put them down or whatever. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. If it's not my opinion, that's fine. I don't then want to really put them down. So everyone should absolutely, be able to have their opinions, be able to voice their opinions, but they should also be open to discussion, to other people's opinions, and to listen to what's got to say, and to be educated and to grow. None of us have got it right. And lots of my opinions in the past have been changed because I've sat down with some very wise people that have given me another side of the same coin. So as long as people are prepared to do that, that's absolutely fine. But you get people that can't hold an argument or can't make an argument or can't have a decent debate, and those people will immediately go to just slagging someone off, to just having a go at them because they haven't got either the intelligence or the articulation to put a good point across.
Yeah. And I know you've still got quite a few ambitions because you're not done yet. And I can tell that. What's the secret of your success so far?
God, that's really difficult. I think a couple of things. So I think from my early years, it was always about people telling me what I couldn't do. And it was always about overcoming that and doing them. So I suppose I had some kind of internal belief in myself that anything was possible, that regardless of what someone told me, and sometimes even myself, sometimes I look in the mirror and say, Michael, this is beyond you. You can't do that. You can't become a regimental sergeant major. You can't be commissioned. Yeah. And guess what? I was. And in my next challenge, obviously I've been commissioned, is I wanted to be a lieutenant colonel, because as a late entry officer, lieutenant colonel is the highest rank that you can get.
It's the pinnacle.
It's the pinnacle. And therefore, that pinnacle for me absolutely had to be achieved. And it's a challenge that I set myself. So that was my next major target, was to get there.
Yeah. So effectively, what you're saying is accept that you can get imposter syndrome from time to time, and then just say, do one. I don't like that imposter syndrome.
So I was just talking to someone the other day that I was mentoring, and we were talking about imposter syndrome, and this was just a young guy, 20 years old, and I said, get used to it, because you're going to have it in pretty much every role that you go into, and that me sitting here in front of you, having sort of over 40 years working life behind him, You know, every role I go into, including the role that I'm in now, guess what? I still get imposter syndrome. I said, look at the board of directors. I said, I can guarantee that if you was to sit down with them with a beer one night and get under their skin, they'll tell you that even in their elevated positions, they get imposter syndrome. I'm afraid it's along for the ride. It's a passenger on the bus that you're never going to get rid of. So learn to embrace it as opposed to try and get rid of it.
Yeah, and I like that. There's a passenger on the bus. Just make sure they pay the fare to be there. and right, I think it's true to say that you probably had a bit of failure.
Have you ever wondered what is going to happen to all your knowledge, wisdom, and skills when you die? Yeah, me too. That is exactly the reason why I created joelteam.com. So I can leave a legacy for my children and for other successful people who are just like you. For less than 40 pence per day, you get access to valuable business and life resources gained from my over 37 years in business and 15 years in the military. These world-class resources are designed to help you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations you deserve. So visit joelteams.com now to find out more. That's joelteams.com, joelteams.com to find out more.
And when that happens, what is it that allows you to deal with it?
Yeah, so I suppose, you know, people have heard it before, but it's very true. But it's all about, you know, if you fall down, it's about how you stand up. It's about how you deal with that failure. And, you know, and it's true. And again, you know, same conversation I had the other day, and I said to him, you know, you will fail. Don't think that you won't fail. You will fail, and you will fail many times. And it's all about how you react to that failure, how you come back with solutions to that failure, not just I've failed, you know, come back with solutions to that failure, come back with ideas about how you're going to make things right. And I suppose, you know, I've also had that. So I've failed many times. And, you know, I've done my best to come back. You know, I'd like to think I've done a good job at coming back, as I wouldn't be where I am now.
I think that's a given, actually, mate.
But you know, the fact that I'm sitting here now, and I'm very, very aware that at some stage in the future, before I retire, I will fail. But you know what? I'll take it on the chin. I'll take the advice given to me by my seniors, and I'll do my absolute best to make things right.
And it's interesting because when I mentor people as well, similar to you, I say, look, failure's all right, and failure is the feedback of champions. You've not failed until you give in. So failure is an acceptable part of life, and getting to success. It's a stepping stone. You've not failed until you just throw in the towel. And I think that's what you're saying, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and I think people see you in your best light when they see you trying to recover from failure. I think that's when people really see you. I think that's when they really start to value you. So yeah, embrace it.
And I know that you say, I'm just looking. I'm just thinking back and paraphrasing. You shared the same spoon, toothbrush, sleeping bag, secrets, and aspirations with many people, many black, the vast majority white, and you have a deep, profound love for them because you've shared experiences and been involved in wars and operational tours that only military guys can be exposed to. And how has that changed you as a person and developed you, do you think?
Yeah, so I'm very, very grateful for the experiences that I've had over my military career. You know, I stopped counting countries when I got into the 30s. God knows how many I've been to.
Yeah.
You know, I've been on many operations around the world, as discussed. But the things that I've witnessed, the things that I've experienced, good and bad, there's obviously lots of things that you never want to see again that you witness because you're on tour. The people that I've met, the cultures that I've met, the different ways that people think, the environments that I've been in, the scenarios that I've been in. You know, I've driven through minefields. I've, sort of corralled people, you know, with my SMG you know, in a certain direction, you know, to go to the to be picked up as POWs. I've, you know, patrolled the streets of a nighttime with, you know, being shot at, RPGs being shot at me in Afghanistan, you know, in you know, kinetic incidents. But also the beauty of some of the places that I've been. You know, I've been to countries where, you know, you look at the stars of a nighttime, you've not seen stars until you've been to some different countries,
Yeah.
particularly out in the Atlantic or the Pacific or whatever. Until you've been there, you've never seen stars like there are stars, you know. You've never seen countryside like, you know, you get in some different places.
Yeah.
And the fact that I've been able to witness all that and being able to live through it, you know, to be part of it, to reach down and touch the grass, to look up and see the stars, to be part of all that, their experiences and memories that the vast majority of people will never ever have. They just will. They'll go through life and they'll just never have that. And I'm very, very grateful for having had those experiences, having met those people of different cultures and the different way that they live and the different beliefs that they have, but recognizing them as people that absolutely are fantastic and beautiful in their own way. And it's just been fantastic. You know, I always say, I got to keep, because if my wife heard me, she'd kill me, but I always say that, you know, I've had such a fantastic time and lived such a varied, widespread life that, you know, if the end came tomorrow, I can't complain. If I had to check out tomorrow, I cannot complain. I've had a fantastic innings. I can't complain at all.
And you've got a profound love for your family. I know that, and that comes through strongly. And I can see the passion for the experience you've gained from being in the military. And then it came to the point where you're thinking, what's next? So what brought you to that decision after you've had such a brilliant career in the military, or certainly some tough stuff, but you've had some great times as well. So what changed?
Yeah, so you know, so by now I'm a lieutenant colonel. I'm coming to the end of my service as such, and you know, I'm offered continuance, so I could have continued in the army, but for me the challenge was no longer there. In terms of the highest rank you can reach is lieutenant colonel, I couldn't promote any further. And it was always about that next rung on the ladder. And now there are no more rungs. So that didn't attract me anymore. And I thought, you know, over 37 years in the army is probably a decent shift.
Yeah.
And it's time to try.
I reckon
it's time
so,
to try
yeah.
something different. Yeah. It's time to try something different. I don't know what, but you know what? And also there was a feeling of wanting to give back, you know, to my family in terms of, you know, being in the military, you spend a lot of time away and this, that, and the other. And I didn't want that anymore for my wife. You know, it was time to sort of give back and spend more time with her. So the decision came, you know, for that I would leave at, you know, 55. I would allow my time to expire, which I did, you know, and I initially went into a job as a civil servant in DSTL in Porton Down. You know, and I was initially, you know, happy enough there because it was no longer a career, it was just a job. It was a 9 to 5, you get paid, thanks very much. You don't have to think too much about things, you know, and my time was spent more concentrating on my family.
Good. So what brought you then to where you are now, which is a career, which is a career that sort of gives you back full circle, really, doesn't it?
So this is where, despite good intentions, despite what you think, the way that you're made up from your experiences, from your time, the things that make you tick, they kick back in. So I was approached by the company I work for now, which is a global defense company, because of my surface-to-air missile background. They wanted someone with a specific skill set that they believed I matched, and I was invited to join the company, which I did. And I've been there now nearly 6 years now, unbelievably, nearly 6 years now. And I absolutely love it. I really do. But again, it doesn't feel like just a job. It feels more like a career because I love what I do and I really understand what I do from my background, and it's really enjoyable. it barely feels like a job. So if I need to do a bit of work at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, or if I need to knock out a presentation of a weekend, that's no hardship. It doesn't feel hard. It's no real problem. And you know, I'm very fortunate because I had 37 years in the military, which I absolutely loved. Despite, you know, take away the bad, but I absolutely loved every minute of it. I then went to DSTL for 18 months, which I really enjoyed. I'm now in this job for nearly 6 years, and I love it. Now, who can say that of their whole working career, of that spans so many years, that they've just loved every minute of it? And I've been so fortunate that I have. I really genuinely have. And I'm the type of person that I am because of the experiences I've had, good and bad. I'm the type of person I am because of that, and it has made me stronger. It has made me grateful and just enjoying life.
Yeah.
Life is good.
Yeah, and it is, and unfortunately, I'm in a similar position to you, and stuff has gone up and down for me as well. And I remember my mum saying to me, "If it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger." And I thought, And at the time, you don't really think what you're talking about. I'm right on my knees here. I'm down. If it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger. I thought, oh, okay, because that comes through. And funnily enough, I must sound like my mum to my kids now, because I say exactly the same thing. And maybe you say something a little bit similar. So we've touched on, although not identified clearly, how transferable you think skills are that you learn in the military to when you get out, and how valuable they are to employers. The reason I ask this question is, say if you're in a mortar platoon, right, and when you get out of the military, you think, what skills, how does being able to be in a mortar platoon qualify me? But it's all the soft skills, isn't it? It's all the other stuff. So how useful are they as you're looking at someone and saying, should I employ this person?
Yeah, so you know, this is very much a sort of a double-edged sword to a degree. So you're absolutely right. There are loads of soft skills that you learn that are very, very valuable out in Civvy Street. You know, your discipline, your timekeeping, your work ethic, all of these are very, very valuable. And depending what sector you go into, you know, will give you greater or lesser success. But what I will say is that, you know, you've got to take command to a degree of your experiences, your education, the things that you can sell into the workplace. You've got to take ownership of those, and you've got to grow those, because depending on where you go, so I work in the defense sector, it's a very technical, engineering kind of arena. And therefore, the type of people that are normally employed are people with engineering qualifications and experience, etc., etc. So to come in as military is not always that easy. It's not because you wouldn't do a fantastic job, because you would. It's because if it's you or someone with a paper qualification to tell them that person can do the job, then normally they'll take the person with the paper qualification. So you've got to make sure that not necessarily that you've got that qualification, but that you've got something that is attractive to the employer. And you need to work on that. You know, that doesn't come for free. You can't just sit back on your laurels and wait for that. You've got to work for that.
And actually, you can use your credits, can't you, as well? Because really, before you come out, you should be thinking, which I'm sure you probably did, you should be thinking a few years prior to leaving, what do I need to do, and finding out and doing your research and development.
So I was very fortunate. I mean, my last sort of 4 years or whatever I spent in Army headquarters, and they were running lots of project management courses. So, you know, APMP, Prince 2, management of risk and management of portfolio, and all of these are proper accredited qualifications. And you know, they didn't cost anything. You could just sign up and go on them if your boss let you go. And so I suppose from about 3 years out, I started signing up for any free course that was going. And my CV reads like I'm a project management guru, you know. And actually, my first job that I went to in DSTL was as a project manager, and it was off the back of those qualifications. Yeah, my CV read really good. It looked like, you know, and also I was able to turn my experiences, i.e., the jobs that I had done, I was able to shape them when I wrote them in such a way as though they were projects that I was delivering. So I had all the qualifications, but I also was able to demonstrate that I had the experience of delivering projects and et cetera, et cetera. So for me, I moved into a really good job that was really well paid as a project manager. Thank you very much. Now, the fact is, I actually hated project management, fine,
Right.
which is why when my current company come along and offered me a job, I went for that, not because I wasn't doing well. It's just that, I didn't particularly like project management, and I absolutely love what I'm doing now. So there's lots of things out there, whether you use your learning credits or whether there are free courses. But when you write your CV or when you put yourself across on an interview, it's how you shape those qualifications and those experiences to show you in depth that you're someone of depth that's able to offer something to that company.
Yeah, and being the age that we are now, we are coaches, mentors to people who are younger. How important, because you, like me, have had a past that's been littered with brilliant people, not only people who've challenged us, but brilliant people who've coached or mentored us. How important do you think having a great coach or mentor, or coach and mentor, is?
Yeah. So absolutely hugely important. So I would always advise someone, if you're able to get a mentor, then get a mentor. If that mentor's not doing what you want that person to do for you, change your mentor, get a different one. And that's really important because everyone doesn't always match up exactly. And make sure that that mentor is able to offer you something in terms of what you want out of that job or what you want out of life. You could have a fantastic mentor, but if they're not geared towards the direction that you're going in, then there's no real point in that. So make sure you get that. The other one that, you talk about coaching, I talk about buddy, it's like, it's like, I come into the job I'm in now, and there's a guy that I met who's an ex-army colonel who effectively took me under his wing. It's as simple as that. He took me under his wing, having come through the transition himself, and sort of all the questions you have about, why is there no one particularly in charge here? Why don't people understand what I'll use the term rank, but you know what I mean, in terms of what rank is everyone around me?
Seniority or whatever.
No one talks about that. No one knows who's the senior person in the room. All those sorts of things that you need to get used to, that culture shock that you need to get used to. He took me under his wing, and even now today, we're very, very good friends. And even now to this very day, he still looks out for me. I used to work for him for a while. He's no longer my boss, but he will still look out for me and let me know when things are going on and this, that, the other. And he doesn't have to, but he does.
That's great. So what would you say to your younger self, your 17-year-old self, if you were able to go back and give yourself a talking to?
God, that's really difficult. So I suppose it's easy in hindsight, isn't it? But firstly, believe in yourself. Understand that people that are horrible towards you, people that are negative towards you, it's normally their own insecurities that make them that way. It's not your insecurities, it's their insecurities that make them that way. So just push past that, just see past that and keep going. Value yourself amongst everyone around you. Make sure you start to get qualifications. Make sure you educate yourself. Make sure you do some reading. Make sure you watch the news. Make sure you're worldly wise. Make sure that you treat people in the way that you wish to be treated, and try and be an example. Always try and be an example to others. And I'm not sure what else to say there.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And well, I tell you what, I was going to say, what's the one tip you would give? I mean, that's it. You've given more than one tip, certainly. So what does the future hold for you now, do you reckon?
Right. So you know what, again, I'm not too sure, but I'm excited by it. So, I don't know how long I'll continue to work, but I'm really enjoying my job at the moment. I travel all over, mainly Europe. I travel all over Europe. Really enjoyable job, making a difference, working still with the military, very close to the military. So I love that side of it. But at some stage, it will come to a time when I need to retire. And that retirement will come about not because I can't work anymore. It'll be because it's the right decision to make, because maybe we want to do some traveling as a me and my wife or whatever. I'm not too sure. It could be that we want to quit the UK and go and live abroad somewhere, maybe, wherever that may be, and do something completely different. I don't know what it will be, but what I do know is whenever I thought about what I want to do in the future, whatever has then transpired as a result, it's been completely different. It's not been what I thought it would be. It's been completely different. So whatever I think of is what we want to do in the future now. All I know is it will be great, but it won't be what I just thought of.
That's fantastic. And how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. Please look for me. If you put in Michael Lawrence MBDA, you'll find me, no problem. More than happy to chat to anyone. I talk to people all the time about transition and try and help people to get into good roles in the defence industry. It's not always easy, but always willing to chat. You'll find me on Facebook and the normal sites. Not that I really use those much. I'm more of a LinkedIn kind of guy. I'm more about professional stuff as opposed to social media tomfoolery sometimes. But if you really want to get hold of me, then find me on LinkedIn, link up, and more than happy to chat.
Michael Lawrence, MBEA, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely brilliant chatting with you. I've had an absolute blast.
Well, Joe, thank you very much for inviting me on, and I hope if any of my words or any of my experiences that I've shared help anyone in any way, then it was worth doing this podcast. And I appreciate what you do for veterans and trying to look after them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. You've been listening to Veterans to Success. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day. Thank you. JoeTeams.com is a resource I have created to fulfill my mission to help 1 million veterans and business entrepreneurs like you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations they deserve. JoeTeams.com is jam-packed full of valuable resources specifically designed to help you on your journey to success. Visit JoeTeams.com now to find out how you can join and start your journey to success immediately. That's JoeTeams.com, JoeTeams, JoeTeams.com. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day.